Shalom everyone. Today we'll continue with a Torah of Boneh, of building, which is making a tent. So making an oil is a Torah of Boneh, in contrast to the Melacha of Boneh, which involves attaching different components such as stone, wood, cement, and metal to construct a house or implement. Making an oil does not involve the attachment of various components, but the erection of something that separates between different areas. The roof of a tent serves as a barrier between the sky and those who are inside the tent, protecting them from the elements. Therefore, pitching a tent on Shabbat using sheets or other things that are not considered construction materials is prohibited by Torah law if the tent is stable and will last for a long time, at least 8 days. So, um, the reason why it's mentioning 8 days is in relevance to the sukkah, because you're also not allowed to build a sukkah on Shabbos because it's supposed to last for 8 days. But if it was a structure that would not serve as a kosher sukkah because it could fall off at any minute, even with a what's called a common wind as opposed to an irregular wind, that's why there's a difference. This is the case even if one tied no knots and used no screws or nails or even pegs, but only loops and pegs. Even if he only made a roof or a wall or even simply added a tefach to an existing roof or wall, he has transgressed the Torah prohibition, according to the Pri Megadim and other Achronim. Um, the Torah prohibition is limited to a permanent, durable oil. The sages further forbade making a temporary oil. Therefore, one may not spread a curtain or netting over a bed, whether for privacy or for protection against insects. Since the critical part of an oil is the roof, one may not make any sort of temporary roof to protect a person beneath it, even if it is only a tefach wide. So back to the idea of the net for insects, if the net is already connected to the main mechitza, the main material of the oil that's already there from before Shabbat, then you would be allowed to lower it. So a lot of sukkahs, for example, have the windows that are made out of mesh. They're big enough for a mosquito to come in, but they also provide a cross breeze. So if it's already connected to the sukkah wall, you're allowed to lower it as long as you're not putting it in a tefach wide horizontally, but vertically is okay. One may put up a temporary mechitza. For example, one may erect a mechitza between men and women attending a Torah lecture or davening. So if you have like the ones that we have in the yeshiva that are on wheels, you're allowed to put that there. However, one may not erect a mechitza that serves to render something halachically permitted mechitza materet, even on a temporary basis. For example, if a sukkah has only two walls, a third wall may not be erected, even if it is temporary, since erecting this mechitza renders the sukkah kosher. Similarly, one may not erect a temporary mechitza in order to close a gap in an eruv, because again, this renders the eruv kosher and basically adding to the whole wall of a city. So, when the eruv string falls, usually it's inspected about an hour before Shabbat, and there's a lot of literature about it because the question is how do you make sure that it's more permanent than otherwise? The rabbinic prohibition of making a temporary oil is limited to the case of a new oil, but one may make a temporary addition to a pre-existing oil. Therefore, one who wishes to spread an awning in his garden on Shabbat to protect himself from the sun should make sure to spread it at least a tefach before Shabbat. He may then extend it fully on Shabbat. Similarly, if the beginning of a permanent roof is already in place, one may put an awning to serve as a temporary continuation of the roof, and one may also take down whatever was temporarily added on Shabbat. Uh, So it's not so relevant for us if we have a store and it has a covering over it. But if somebody forgot before Shabbat to raise it completely, but they started already, then that's this idea that you could talk about, as we saw last week, that you're allowed to even pull um, a extension of the roof onto your porch, as long as you're not making anything, um, electronically or even mechanically, as long as just by hand. Even if no one had actually begun to spread out the awning before Shabbat, but it contains a pull string that is designed for extending it, this string is considered the beginning of the extension, and thus one may complete the extension of the awning on Shabbat. A porch's sliding roof that is attached with hinges or that slides on a track may be opened and closed on Shabbat. This is because it is not considered an ohel, but rather is comparable to opening and closing a door. Similarly, one may open a patio umbrella that is permanently affixed in the yard. And this brings us to the question about a different umbrella. So the hinged hood or canopy of a baby carriage or stroller may be opened and closed on Shabbat. Furthermore, since it may be opened, it is considered the beginning of an ohel, and one may add to it as well. Thus, if one wishes to protect more of the carriage by extending the hood using a cloth diaper or a plastic sheet, they may do so. Um, and so that brings us to the Humrah of umbrella and, like I said in the text, a Borsalino hat, because it does usually have a wider brim than a tefach. As we have seen, making even a temporary ohel is rabbinically prohibited. Included in this prohibition is placing a wide board or a sheet across vertical supports to protect oneself from the elements. However, when the supports are not permanent, this can be permitted if the ohel is erected in a manner that differs significantly from the normal way of doing it. The sages forbade putting up a temporary ohel in the usual order, first putting up the walls or supports and only then putting up the roof. However, if the order is reversed, the sages permit one to put up a temporary ohel. Thus, if the roof is first held up in the air and then walls or supports are placed underneath it, this would be permitted. Usually, a second person is necessary in order to erect a tent in this way, and that's also called a shinui because a melacha that can be done with one person, if it's done with two people, that's already a kula, a leniency. These rules apply to children's games as well. Children who are of an age where they can understand the laws of Shabbat may not spread blankets over chairs in order to create a tent in which to play. So that's a very common game for kids. But they may hold the blanket in the air and then place chairs underneath it. Similarly, they may not use interlocking toy bricks like Lego to build a house or garage whose inside area is a square tefach. So a tefach is approximately 3 inches, so 3 inches by 3 inches or more, but they may hold the roof up and then attach the walls from underneath. And just as one may not put up a temporary ohel, one may not take one down. Just as one may put up a temporary ohel if he changes the order of the construction, so too he may take one down if the changes the order, and the walls must be removed first and only afterwards the roof. Um, so one may place a tabletop on legs as long as each leg is less than a tefach wide. In such a case, the legs are not considered mechitzot, and one may set the legs first and then place the tabletop on top of them. If each of the legs is a tefach wide, they are considered mechitzot. If one wishes to set up such a table, he must hold the tabletop in the air and then have someone else slip the legs underneath it. In contrast, when opening a folding crib, one may place the board and mattress normally as there are no walls beneath them, and also there's not enough space that is underneath them that you can use for storage or anything like that. The same way, one may open a baby carriage or stroller, a folding table, a folding chair, a cot, or a playpen on Shabbat, because the entire structure is already completed and connected before Shabbat. The only part that is done on Shabbat is opening it. One may not cover a very large barrel, which is, I think, less relevant to us. So let's just go to the umbrella. Many maintain that it is rabbinically forbidden to put on a hat with a hard brim, a tefach wide, because doing so is considered making a temporary ohel. This is despite the fact that one may use a hand fan to shield himself from the sun and hold a talit horizontally over one who is called up to the Torah in honor of his marriage, or Birkat Kohanim. Nevertheless, a hat that remains on one's head without moving is more similar to a temporary oil. So the custom, though, is to be lenient and to allow one to wear a black hat because it is worn primarily for the sake of honor and not to provide shade. It is also possible that the brims of today's hats are not considered hard. They used to be made out of, I think, wood, and now it's more like cardboard. Alternatively, perhaps the custom relies on Rashi, who maintains that the hat is never comparable to an oil. The only concern is that if one's hat is blown off, people might chase after it and end up carrying it. And the universal custom is to forbid using an umbrella on Shabbat because it resembles an oil. So even if it was open from before Shabbat, which usually means that there has to be a wider space in the entrance to the house or the shul, because of Marit Ayin, because of what it may seem as if we start opened it on Shabbat. That is why we do not allow it. And as they say, Minhag Israel Dinu, the custom of the Jewish people is a halacha, and so that is the accepted halacha for people who follow the Orthodox way. And we'll stop here.
Yes, Shikoach.
Thank you.